is you can literally set the terms to whatever you want it to be. So that's what's crazy about seller financing or creative financing. So first, I just kind of want to start like what are the benefits of creative financing for the buyer. So what's nice for the buyer is all creative finance deals, it's typically less than 25% down. If you go through a traditional bank, you need 25% down at least. Maybe today you might need about 25 to 35% down. So of creative finance, you can most of my deals, I've gotten 10 to 15% average down payment on creative financing. And what's also nice about creative financing is you don't need any credit, right? Like if you're starting off in single family and going to apartment complexes, a lot of lenders want you to have prior experience, but you're stuck in that catch 22. Like, how do I get experience if no one wants to lend me an apartment complex? So if you can do creative financing, you can basically get a deal and bypass the bank. So that's what's kind of nice as well. And then another thing too is, like I said, you can structure the deal however you like. And with creative financing, you can do a win-win situation. So I'll kind of get into some examples later. But that's just kind of the benefits for the buyer. In terms of the seller, there's actually a lot of good benefits. So, when I get my off-market deals, half the battle is just building trust and rapport. To be honest, I'm a stranger. I sent you a letter, from California. I'm mailing letters to Oklahoma, and I'm just a random guy that sent a letter. So you basically have to build that trust and figure out what the pain points are. So this is where it's a little bit more like soft skills that you need, more so versus like, hard technical skills. But, a lot of times the owners, let's say the property, they tell you they own the property for 30 years. And right off the bat, if someone owned a property for 30 years, the loans are amortized over 25 to 30 years. So most likely the property's paid off and it's owned free and clear, right? So if it's owned free and clear, you go to sell it, there's no loan. The owner is going to pay large capital gains tax, most likely long-term capital gains tax, which ranges from 0 to 20%. So if you're selling an apartment for 2 million and it's a 20% tax bracket, like you can do the math. That's how much tax they'll pay. So right there, that's one seller motivation right there, right? Like, do they want a large tax bill? And then number two is in that same situation, these owners are used to getting cash flow every month. Like they literally own this apartment complex for 30 years. They've been getting cash flow every month. And it's hard to lose that, right? But if you seller finance the deal, the seller becomes the bank, and then essentially the bank gets paid on a monthly basis. So that's where you can negotiate with the seller, if they're open to doing seller financing. And another strategy too is, maybe the property is poorly managed. There's a lot of situations where I send a letter out, and the three most common situations, I call it 3Ds. It's death, divorce, and disability. So I work in healthcare, so I see this stuff every day, like literally every day in the emergency department. Um, so let's just say, maybe the owner got hit by a car, he was self-managing the property, you know, no one else in the family wants to take care of it. They're too stressed out trying to deal with this disability. You might be crippled or handicapped now, and the property goes to the wayside, right? Like no one's managing the tenants anymore. They're not paying, increase in vacancy. They're not doing any repairs. Tenants don't pay. And that type of deal I just described, no lender would touch that with a 10-foot stick. So in that situation, their only choice is to do creative financing, unless you do a hard money loan. You can do a hard money loan, but you're going to be paying, 3 to 5 points up front and, 10 to 14% interest only. So, but, your other alternative is to do kind of creative finance where you can kind of create a win-win situation. So that's also very common, right? Like people, when they're dealing with those 3Ds, they don't want to like worry about the real estate anymore. They just want to move on and kind of focus on the situation at hand. And if you do seller financing, you can close in 7 days. I mean, to be honest, like if I did a fully seller finance deal, I only need 7 days. And I only need 7 days because I just need to do a full property inspection. And depending on how many units it is, if it's 26 units, I can do it in one day. If it's 100 units, I probably need close to a week to inspect all 100 units. And then from there, I'll know if I want to take the deal or not. So that's another kind of powerful thing with creative financing is, you can kind of help people solve problems. And, I kind of emphasize in real estate, especially apartment complexes, you're not buying real estate, you're buying situations. And people have different situations at multiple segments of their life, right? Like right now they can be okay, but maybe in a year there might have been a death, divorce, disability that happened. So that's why if you consistently do a direct mailing campaign, like if your letter arrives at the right time and you can solve that situation, then you'll get that deal. So that's why it just takes consistency. And that's the only difference between me closing versus someone else, because these apartment owners are getting cold called, cold text, people knocking their doors, they're sending letters. But what makes you stand out is if you can solve the problem for them and explain how to solve that problem for them, because essentially you're a stranger. So if you can hone that soft skill, you can literally buy so much real estate, create it financed, and it makes it a lot easier. And kind of another form of creative financing. So I'll go into specifics later. I'm just kind of talking at a high global level right now. But there's might be a situation where, the apartment complex, it's valued based on the NOI divided by the market cap rate. So if you increase the NOI, it increases the value of the property. That's good. But if you don't manage a property correctly and the NOI goes down, the property value goes down. So let's just say I bought it for $1 million. The NOI was, let's just make it 10,000, but I became disabled and now my NOI is 5,000. It's worth half now. It's worth half a million now. And if I sold that, I'd take a loss because my loan's probably 750,000. So if seller financing, or specifically subject to or master lease agreements, they could sell it to me. I just can take over the operations. I can take over all the management, all the day-to-day operations. They shift the deed over to my name. I'll pay them a monthly payment. The owner's name is still on the loan. They'll still continue to service the loan as usual. And there you go. You just solved the problem, right? So that's what's beautiful about creative financing. And why I want to talk about creative financing, because a lot of people, they ask me, like, Steven, how much money do I need to start? And if you go traditional financing, you need $300,000 to start. Like that's where, and that's buying like less than $1 million apartment complex in Oklahoma. And a lot of people do not have $300,000, and a lot, that's why people have to syndicate, right? Like they syndicate or they partner because they don't have that money. But on the flip side, who's going to trust you if you've never done a deal before? Like, are you just going to give me deals? I actually love Oklahoma. I own 2 apartment complexes in Oklahoma, and I want to buy more. So I actually love the market. Um, but in any case, so let me go into some specifics. This is a lot of information. It's going to blow your mind. This definitely blew my mind once I learned this concept. So let's get into specifics. So, okay, the first one is seller carry first. So what does seller carry first mean? That means that the property is owned free and clear. There's no debt on the loan. It's owned free and clear. And a lot of my letters, to be honest, they hit a lot of these owners that own the property free and clear. And basically, seller carry first means that the owner will seller finance in first lien position. So first lien position is what the lender is. So if you buy a single family home or an apartment complex and you get a loan, the lender's in the first lien position. So if you go bankrupt, the lender they get first priority. They take over the property, they'll sell it, they'll take back their money, right? That's first lien position. That only applies if it's owned free and clear. That's it. So basically they become the bank. So it's a pretty simple concept, right? So half the battle, and I mean, this is a golden nugget. That's if you apply this strategy, you'll literally make hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm just going to throw it out there. But basically, if you can sell that, and how I sell it is you tell them you're becoming the bank, right? Like you move the totem pole. As an investor, I put down 25%. I ask 75% from the bank. But the next level is you become the bank, right? Like you're now getting paid on a monthly basis. You're not doing anything, right? If the operator that takes over the property messes up, you just take back over the property. You get to keep all the renovation expense that they did. You get to keep their down payment, all the interest payments you were made, and you just take over the property again. It's not like you're a beginner, right? You've managed a property for 30 years. So you can become the bank and have first lien position. So that's what's kind of nice. So, but sometimes the owner might say, hey, I want to transfer this money over to my business. Well, in that case, you can maybe have the seller carry second. So seller carries second means that they're in the second lien position. And what that means is it just helps you with your down payment. So as an example, if you need 25% down from the traditional lender, the seller can carry maybe 10 to 15% down. So that means that you only have to come out of pocket with 10 to 15% down. So now you're leveraged, right? You only have to down 10 to 15% versus 25 to 30. And what happens is the owner's in second lien position. So if you file bankruptcy, the lender gets whatever they need first, and the second lien position gets all the leftovers. So sometimes they may not get back their initial investment, so it's riskier, right? So typically, if someone's in second lien position, you pay them a higher interest rate because it's more risk, right? So that's how you incentivize people with that. And so, and you can ask, well, hey, the bank's in the first lien position. Will they care if someone's in the second lien position? And surprisingly, they do care. For some reason, they do care. And the reason for that is because it's more risk, right? They want you to have skin in the game as the operator. But my mentality is it never hurts to ask, right? And it's how you talk to the lenders. So when you talk to lenders, and no broker or syndicator will tell you this, but when you talk to lenders, literally all they care about is the debt service coverage ratio, and that has to be greater than 1.25. So once you know that and can leverage that concept, it's negotiations at this point. So I'll give you an example. If I down 25% on a property, my debt service coverage ratio is 1.5. That means it's a good property, right? Like it's cash flowing and the lender's going to like it. So when I pitch seller carry second, I say, hey, the seller will carry 15% down. I'm paying him 8% interest. And despite that, my debt service coverage ratio is still above 1.25. Let's just say it's 1.3. Is it okay if the seller carries second 15% in second lien position? If you phrase it that way, you're now speaking the lender lingo, right? So like you have to ask it in many different ways. If they don't understand that, you just keep on phrasing it like, how can this be done, right? And if you work with the big national banks like Chase or Wells Fargo, they're going to say no, right? Because they're so strict. They have to go through certain processes. But if you work with a local community bank, like let's say one that's local in Oklahoma, whatever, I have a couple that I work with. Those ones, they might play ball with you because they're more flexible. You can talk to the president and you just talk numbers, right? All they care about is debt service coverage ratio above 1.25. And you ask, like I literally had a mobile home park under contract in Oklahoma, Woodward, Oklahoma specifically, and that thing with 30% down, it cash flowed. The debt service coverage ratio was 1.7. And I immediately asked, hey, can the seller carry 15%? And they said yes. So unfortunately, the deal fell through, but it's just kind of that concept of asking, right? And it never hurts to ask, and leveraging that. So that's seller carry second. And sometimes, like I said, what's beautiful about seller carry second is it can be like 50%. It can be whatever they want, right? If the property's owned free and clear, but that's how I negotiate it. And sometimes, like I'll say, hey, you can get 80% of your money, just lend me 20%. Right? So there's many creative ways to do that. Or on even a side note, it's kind of a workaround the lender. I don't recommend this, but something I thought about is they can become a private money lender to your LLC, have no lien position on the property. They can use that money to basically, renovate the property as an example. So that's another example you can leverage with creative financing. So that's seller carry second. The next concept, it's a little bit confusing in my opinion still. It's subject to or master lease agreement. So basically, subject to is more common in single family. That's a single family terminology. Master lease agreement is just the commercial real estate terminology of that, but they're one and the same. Master lease agreement equals subject to. I just use master lease agreement because it sounds more sophisticated. Like, oh, I have a master lease agreement with you. And it's actually more common than you think. Like the Empire State Building in New York, that was purchased through a master lease agreement. So it's been around for, hundreds of years. So it's nothing new, right? But where you make your money or how you execute it is how you explain it. And even I struggle, to be honest, to explain it. But basically, you just transfer, to dumb it down, you just transfer the deed from the other owner's name to your name. And then you'll take over the day-to-day operations. You'll negotiate agreed upon, price to buy it at, the monthly payment and your down payment. And the owner, because subject to, you typically would do this if there's still a loan on the property. That's why you do it. They're still a loan. It's not owned free and clear. So if you do subject to, at that point, they're still a loan. So the owner has to continue making payments to their lender. But then you make a payment to the owner, and then they make the payment to the lender as usual. So usually you want to automate that with a servicing company, a third party servicing company, like an escrow company, for example. They'll basically, you pay the servicing company, they'll pay the owner, and the owner will pay the lender. And the biggest fear that people have is a due on sale clause. So it is valid, right? When you transfer ownership from, let's just say, John over to me via subject to or master lease agreement, it can trigger a due on sale clause. But from my experience and from what I heard, for people that do hundreds of deals, um, lenders don't care unless if you pay them, right? As long as you pay them, they don't really care like what happens with the property. They're not in the business of managing the property. But if you do work with the local community bank and they happen to audit it, sometimes it just takes a conversation with the lender, usually the president of the bank, to explain what you're doing. Because in a weird way, if you didn't do subject to or master lease agreement and the owner is in a bad situation, they're going to have to foreclose. The bank's going to foreclose on that owner, and the bank has to take over the management of the property. And the bank doesn't want to do that. So if you explain that, hey, like, owner's in a bad situation, I'm taking over, I'm making all the payments, and this is my value add plan to make sure this apartment runs smoothly. So, that's just another strategy you have to deal with. And as you go through those hurdles. So, those are kind of three strategies that I typically pitch. And kind of a fourth strategy I like to do as well is seller repair credit. So what I really specialize in is, so when you buy an apartment complex, and let's say you have 100 units, you have to pay to inspect all 100 units. Like, some people are cheap. A lot of syndicators are cheap. They won't inspect all 100 units. I'll be honest. They inspect, like, they'll do a sample. They'll maybe sample like 20 out of 100 because it's cheaper and faster, right? But for me, I personally recommend you should inspect all 100 units. If you have a 100-unit apartment complex, you pay to get 100 units inspected because you don't want any surprises. It just takes like 5 bad units to ruin your deal. So for me, I don't want big surprises. So I pay all 100 units to get inspected. And then when I have the inspector there, I have my property manager there. I can be there if I want to be. And then also I'll have my contractor there because I'm getting quotes. Everything has a price, right? Hey, this unit's burned down. They never disclosed that to me. Well, how much does it cost to fix a burned down unit? I'm doing one right now. It's $60,000 in Oklahoma. It's very expensive. And that's Oklahoma. I could probably buy a brand new house for $60,000 in Oklahoma. And you inspect all the units, and then you basically, at the end of the inspection, you send the owner the inspection report, you give them all the quotes, and you ask for amendment to the contract to get a seller repair credit. And what's nice is, let's just say, my 26 unit asked for 120,000. He said, no, property as is. And I just said, well, hey, there's all these safety hazards. Like, if I don't close on this property, you're going to have to fix all these safety hazards for the tenants. So let's meet in the middle. Give me 60,000. And he agreed. So it cut my down payment from 120,000 to 60,000. I down 60,000. I basically got the property for 10% down, essentially. So that's the power, right? And another tactic too is, so for my 26 unit as an example, I bought it for $500,000. It appraised at $750,000. So now that I know that if you offer a tax assessed price and they accept it, that's always under appraisal value. So what I do to the seller, I said, hey, can you just bump up my price by $200,000? So I bought for $500,000. Now I raise it to $700,000. But you give me $200,000 at the close of escrow for seller repair credit. And if you do the math, 25% of $500,000 is $125K. I asked for $200K in seller repair credit. I'm getting $70,000 at the close of escrow. I made money to buy this piece of property. Like, once you know that concept, you get paid to own a 26 unit apartment complex. Like, I literally paid someone, I think $5,000 to join a mentorship just to learn that concept I just threw out there. There is no cap in terms of the seller repair credit. You just have to phrase it in a clean way. So the way I phrase it is seller repair credit of $60,000 for renovation expense, because you want to make it seem that it's for seller renovation, something like that. Because you want to make it known to the lender that you're using that money for renovation. And you should be saving it for renovation, right? It's not like, hey, I'm just going to lower it. But that's just an example of a deal where, like, I wish I did it on my first deal because I didn't realize that my property would overappraise by 250,000. But I could have literally asked for 100,000 more, asked for another 100,000 of seller repair credit, and I'd be 0% down in the deal and make money. Like, where else could you get a deal for free and make money? You can't do that in single family homes. So once you understand that concept, it blew my mind. Like that, that's like the golden nugget I had for this whole episode. is literally that concept. If you can master that concept, like, commercial real estate's unlimited. It really blew my mind. Um, so for me, I always treat it as seller repair credit because that's how. Like, if you were to ask me, would you rather have 100,000 off the price or 100,000 in seller repair credit? I'll always get 100,000 seller repair credit because that reduces my down payment, and you're more leveraged, right? So, um, so that's just kind of the concept there. So yeah, I learned that in one of my mentorships, and that completely blew my mind. So I'm just hoping to share this here, and I'm uploading this on YouTube. I went pretty fast, oversimplified the concepts, but basically I just went over like 4 to 5 strategies and basically how to get no or low money down. And what's also beautiful about creative financing too is like a lot of these owners, like, they're so fixated on a price and it's overpriced. Like, a lot of these owners, let's just say they want $1 million. They're fixated on $1 million, but it's worth $750,000 based on your sales comps, your NOI divided by cap rate, and maybe tax assessed price. And a bank won't lend on it, right? Because it's like, hey, they're not going to overpay for a property. At that point, I just tell them, hey, like, I underwrote the deal. The lender will not lend on it. Like, do you want to do creative financing? Like, if that's the case, I'll pay you your price. I'll pay you whatever price you want, but you give me my terms. Your price, my terms. And what are my terms? I'm going to negotiate. I want a low down payment. So what I typically do is 10%. My rules 10-5-5. I also learned this in my mentorship as well. 10% down, 5-year term, 5% interest only. That's where you start, right? But depending on the situation, I try to ask for less. Like, give me 5% down. It's negotiable, right? You can ask for a 10-year term, 15-year term, 20-year term. Some owners, they want to get monthly payments for the rest of their life as well as to pass on to their kids. In that case, I negotiate 20, 30-year terms because the kids don't want anything to do with the real estate. They just want the monthly income. The trust fund babies, right? That's what they want. They don't want to do all that. They just want to get the monthly cash flow. So, once you kind of understand those concepts, like creative finance, you can do whatever you want. And I'll tell you another strategy that I do. This is like literally a pro tip that works every time. Let's just say the owner wants 20% down, right? Or 25% down or 30% down. I'll be like, sure, I'll give you 30% down. I'll give you 5% year one, another 5% year two, the next 5% year three. And if you're smart about it, your cash flow will build up enough that 5% is covered by your annual cash flow. So essentially, you're getting it 0% down yourself. So there's, like I said, there's so many ways to do creative financing. And, I just basically, spit out a masterclass in creative financing in about 25 minutes. So I'm going to open up to some questions now. I saw a lot of questions in the comments. I'll go through those first, and then I'll just do a live Q&A. So for lenders, if you do seller financing, seller carry second, you must be transparent with the lender. Like, if you do not disclose that to the lender and you get a second lien position, they will definitely do a due on sale clause on you. So you want to be fully transparent with them. Another strategy that I missed is called cross collateral loans. It's not as common in today's age, but basically you're using equity from another property that you own. So let's just say for me, I own a single family home with about $500,000 equity in California. I can take some of that equity to lower my down payment for a new apartment complex that I'm buying. So let's just say I need 25% down. I can take 10% equity from my single family home if the lender lets me, and they'll be in second lien position on my single family home because I have a lender there already, and it'll help me reduce my down payment. But if you default, they're going to take over your single family home, force you to sell it, take their money. So that's the risk you take, right? So that's why a lot of lenders do not want to do that. But for me, I can't get HELOCs on some of my investment properties. I can't cash out refinance because the rates are terrible. My interest rate's like 3%. No way it's going to be 3%. But that's another way to leverage your equity that you have to make it from debt equity over to live equity. So that's called the velocity equity, right? So And then ultimately, when you do creative financing, you have to know what your end strategy is, right? So I'm buy and hold. So for me, I want long terms. I want cheap interest rates, right? I want that term to be 20, 30 years because I'm gonna hold this for the rest of my life, right? And I want it gives me time to do my value add plan, and eventually I'll do a cash out refi, pay off the seller, and then own the property, pull out some cash, and kind of repeat. That's the Burr method on steroids, right? When you do the Burr with apartment complexes, I call it the Burr on steroids because you make so much more money and it's so much easier and faster. Well, a little more headache and stress, but once you execute it, you make so much money there. So let me go through the lenders. So there's no cap on the closing credit for the lender. I just be transparent that hey, I show the lender my inspection report, and usually when you look at the inspection report, there's so many items that need to be fixed that you can easily justify, closing credit or seller repair credit, and they know and they want you to have that money, right? Because they know that it's going to go back to fixing the roof, electrical panel, HVAC, all those big ticket items, landscaping, paint, whatever, right? Like as long as you make it known that you're using it for renovation. In worst case, they might just hold it in an escrow account that you can only use it when it's approved for a renovation. Like that's your worst case situation if they want to be difficult with you. So that's why I say it's all about negotiations, right? You can always create a win-win situation. You just have to think creatively.